The paramedic slapped my face, not hard, just enough to keep me conscious. "Mr. Calloway, stay with me." I tried answering, nothing came out. My lungs felt like they were filling with wet cement. Every breath arrived late. Every breath left too soon. The oxygen mask pressed tightly against my face. The ambulance siren screamed somewhere above me. Lights flashed. Machines beeped. Someone shouted my blood pressure. Then another voice cut through everything. A woman's voice, annoyed, impatient. Not frightened, not worried, annoyed. "For God's sake, pull his mask." The ambulance suddenly became silent in my head. Not actually silent. Just the way the world sounds when your brain refuses to believe what it heard. The paramedic looked up. "What?" My daughter-in-law folded her arms. "We're already 30 minutes late. My parents have been waiting at the restaurant." The paramedic stared at her. She pointed at me. "If he's conscious enough to complain, he's conscious enough to wait." Then she said the sentence I'll remember until the day I die. "Pull his mask. We're late for dinner." Nobody spoke. Even the ambulance driver glanced into the rearview mirror. The paramedic finally laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes people say things so monstrous your brain rejects them. "Ma'am, he can't breathe." She shrugged. "He always makes everything about himself." I watched my son waiting, praying, expecting him to say something, anything, tell her to stop, tell her she's insane, tell her to get out. Instead, my son looked down at his phone and stayed silent. That hurt worse than the lack of oxygen. "My name is Gerald Calloway. I'm 73 years old, and until that ambulance ride, I genuinely believed my family loved me. Not because they said it, because I'd spent decades proving my love to them. I assumed love worked the same way in reverse. Turns out, it doesn't. 3 hours earlier, I'd been standing inside my kitchen making peach cobbler, not for myself, for them, always for them. My son Trevor loved peach cobbler as a child. His wife, Vanessa, claimed mine was better than any restaurant. My 2 grandsons would fight over the last piece, so every Sunday, I baked one. Nobody asked me to. I simply liked seeing people happy. Funny thing about generosity, the wrong people eventually start treating it like rent. I was pulling the cobbler from the oven when the pain started. Sharp, sudden, like somebody had shoved an ice pick through my chest. The pan slipped from my hands. Glass shattered. Peaches splattered across the floor. I remember grabbing the counter, then the refrigerator, then nothing. Apparently my neighbor heard the crash. Mrs. Ramirez found me 20 minutes later, curled beside the kitchen island, barely conscious. She called the ambulance, then called Trevor, then Vanessa. Big mistake. By the time the ambulance arrived, Vanessa was already there, not helping, complaining, the restaurant reservation, the inconvenience, the wasted evening, the embarrassment. Not once did she ask whether I was going to live. The paramedic adjusted my oxygen. My vision blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again. Someone started an IV. Someone else checked my pulse. Vanessa kept talking, like a woman arguing over parking validation. Finally, the paramedic snapped. "Ma'am, if you say another word, you'll be getting out of this ambulance." She looked offended, as though she were the victim. The hospital entrance appeared ahead. Bright lights, sliding doors, doctors wait. I thought the nightmare was over. It wasn't, because just before the stretcher rolled through those doors, I heard Vanessa whisper to Trevor. The whisper wasn't meant for me, but I heard every word. "Your father has become a burden. We need to start talking about the house." The house, interesting, because at that moment, I couldn't breathe, and she was already discussing what would happen after I was gone. I closed my eyes, not from weakness, from understanding. For the first time, I realized the ambulance wasn't the beginning of my emergency. It was the end of an illusion. And what happened over the next 10 days would cost Trevor and Vanessa far more than a dinner reservation. I woke up on the 4th floor, Rome 417 cardiac intensive care. The first thing I saw was the ceiling. The second was a nurse staring at me like she'd just won a bet. "Look who's back." My throat felt like sandpaper. How long? 3 days. 3 days. 3 entire days missing, gone. Apparently my heart had stopped twice during surgery. The doctors brought me back both times. Most people would call that a miracle. The hospital administrator later called it expensive. The nurse handed me a cup of water, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." She looked uncomfortable. "Who is Vanessa?" I frowned. My daughter-in-law. Her expression changed immediately. The same expression you give someone after discovering they were robbed by their own family. What happened? She bit her lip. Nothing. Hospital staff always say nothing when something definitely happened. 2 hours later, I learned the truth. Not from a doctor, not from my son, from a janitor. A janitor. He recognized me while cleaning my room. "You feeling better, sir?" "Trying." He nodded, then asked, "That woman isn't coming back, right?" "What woman?" "The blonde one." My stomach tightened. Vanessa, apparently. The day after my surgery, she marched into the hospital demanding access to my financial records. Not my condition, not my recovery plan, not my medication, my finances. When staff refused, she accused them of hiding information, then demanded to know whether I had life insurance. In the lobby, in front of everyone, like she was asking about restaurant reservations. I stared at the janitor. "You're serious?" He nodded. Whole floor heard it. Interesting. Very interesting, because Vanessa thought hospitals worked like restaurants. She didn't know hospitals also create witnesses, lots of them. The next visitor arrived that afternoon. My attorney, not because I called him, because he called me. His name was Elliot Graves, and unlike most lawyers, Elliot hated surprises. "Gerald, you alive?" "Barely. Good. Now tell me why your son is trying to liquidate assets that don't belong to him." I sat upright. "What?" Silence. Then Elliot spoke slowly, like a man explaining fire to a child. "Trevor contacted 3 investment firms. He requested valuation reports. He requested ownership structures. He requested transfer procedures." My pulse monitor immediately accelerated. The nurse looked over. I waved her off. "Transfer procedures?" "Correct." "For what?" Another pause, then Elliot answered. "The Callaway Foundation." I froze, completely. The Callaway Foundation, the one thing Trevor didn't know existed. 31 years earlier, after selling my manufacturing company, I quietly created a charitable foundation, not a public charity, not some celebrity vanity project, a private foundation. Its purpose was simple. Emergency housing for elderly people abandoned by their families. Thousands had been helped over 3 decades. Most people never knew. I preferred it that way, including Trevor, especially Trevor. Only 3 people knew the foundation's actual structure. Me, Elliot, and my accountant. That's why Trevor's interest terrified me, because it meant somebody had been digging hard. Elliot continued. "Gerald, I need to ask you something." "What?" "Has your son recently gained access to your home?" "Yes." "Your office?" "Yes." "Your files?" I closed my eyes. "Yes, for years." "Then that's how." My chest tightened, not from heart failure, from realization. While I was unconscious, someone had been searching, not visiting Metching. The next morning, I received confirmation. Mrs. Ramirez called. "Gerald, you need to sit down." "I'm already sitting." "Good." She took a deep breath. "I saw movers." My blood went cold. "What movers?" "At your house." Trevor and Vanessa had entered my home 2 days after my surgery, not to water plants, not to collect mail, not to secure the property. Movers, boxes, furniture, office, cabinets, storage, everything. My neighbor watched it happen from across the street. The entire neighborhood assumed I'd died, because that was the only explanation that made sense. Then Mrs. Ramirez said something that changed everything. They weren't just taking things, they were throwing things away. What things? Old paperwork, books, photographs, files, years of my life, dumped into industrial trash containers, like garbage, because they believed I wasn't coming back. I didn't feel angry, not immediately. Something colder arrived first. Clarity. Pure clarity, for the first time. I understood exactly what Trevor and Vanessa saw when they looked at me. Not a father, not a grandfather, not a human being. An obstacle between them and something they wanted. That afternoon, the head cardiologist entered my room. He carried test results, a serious expression, and news that should have frightened me. Instead, it became the least shocking thing I heard all week, because by then, I had already decided something. Trevor and Vanessa thought they were preparing for my funeral. They had no idea I was preparing for theirs, not a funeral with flowers, a funeral for every lie they'd built their lives upon. And unlike them, I intended to attend mine personally. The cardiologist closed the door before speaking. That was never a good sign. Doctors only close doors when they're about to change your future. He sat beside my bed, opened a folder, then removed his glasses. Mr. Calloway, the surgery was successful. I nodded, good. However, there it was, the word every patient hates. However, the damage was worse than expected. How bad? You need to make significant changes. No stress, no long workdays, no major emotional events. I laughed, actually laughed. The doctor looked confused. I pointed toward the window. My son is currently looting my house. My daughter-in-law is apparently inventorying my belongings. And you're telling me to avoid stress. Even he smiled at that. After he left, I called Elliot. How quickly can you get here? 2 hours. Bring everything, everything, everything. He arrived carrying 3 banker's boxes. The man looked less like an attorney and more like someone preparing for war. Good, because so was I. The first box contained foundation records. The second contained property records. The third contained secrets. Lots of them. 31 years worth. Elliot placed a thick file on my hospital tray. You never wanted your family involved. I remember. I had reasons, apparently. The Calloway Foundation wasn't small. Trevor thought it was a charity. It wasn't. It was an entire network, housing facilities, community centers, senior emergency shelters, scholarship programs, medical assistance funds, botrops in 6 states, assets worth nearly $90 million. Not because I chased money, because I spent decades reinvesting everything, quietly, patly, without publicity. Trevor knew none of this. Vanessa knew none of this to them. I was simply an old man in a paid-off house, a retired widower who baked desserts. That misunderstanding was about to become expensive. Elliot handed me another folder. Now for the interesting part. I opened it, photographs, dozens of them. My stomach tightened. What am I looking at? Your house. I flipped pages. Every photo had a timestamp. Movers carrying boxes, movers removing furniture, movers entering my office, movers emptying filing cabinets. Mrs. Ramirez hadn't just watched, she'd documented everything. Then came the final photograph, Vanessa, standing in my study, holding a framed photograph of my late wife, laughing, actually laughing, while pointing toward a trash container. I stared at the image. For a very long time, no anger, no tears, just stillness. Elliot finally broke the silence. You okay? No, good. He nodded. I'd be worried if you were. Then he slid over a legal document, 1 page, still direct. I read it twice, then smiled for the first time all week. That's legal? Completely. You're sure? Absolutely. Interesting, very interesting, because Trevor thought inheritance was his biggest opportunity. In reality, inheritance was the smallest thing he stood to lose. The following morning, I checked myself out of the hospital, against recommendations, against advice, against common sense. The nurses hated it, the doctors hated it, but I wasn't dying, and I had somewhere to be. The driver pulled into my neighborhood around noon. Half the street stopped to stare. Apparently news of my survival had traveled quickly. Mrs. Ramirez burst into tears the moment she saw me. You're alive. Last time I checked. She hugged me so hard my ribs hurt, then pointed toward my house. You're going to want to see this. The front lawn looked normal. The exterior looked normal. The inside did not. Furniture missing. Family photographs gone. Cabinets emptied, drawing rooms stripped. My office nearly destroyed. They hadn't packed. They had scavenged, like vultures arriving before death was finished working. Then I heard voices, upstairs, inside my bedroom, Trevor and Vanessa. I slowly climbed the stairs 1 step at a time. My heart monitor wasn't there anymore, but I could practically hear it. Their backs were facing me. Neither noticed. Vanessa held a jewelry box. Where is it? Trevor opened another drawer. It has to be here. No way he moved it. Then she said something that made everything click. The foundation papers are worth more than the house. Silence, Dovensalt's silence, because now I understood. The ambulance, the hospital, the financial questions, the searching, the movers, none of it was about inheritance. They'd discovered part of the foundation, and they thought control of it would eventually become theirs. I stepped into the doorway. You won't find them. Both froze. The jewelry box slipped from Vanessa's hands. Trevor turned white, completely white, like he'd seen a ghost. Honestly, I enjoyed that part. Dad, his voice cracked. Dad, we thought. I was dead. Nobody answered, because accuracy doesn't require confirmation. Vanessa tried first. Mr. Calloway, this isn't what it looks like. I looked around the room, net-pre drawers, missing files, .deed office, boxes stacked everywhere. Then back at her. You're right, it's much worse. Trevor stepped forward. We were trying to organize things. I laughed, a short laugh, dangerous. With movers? Nobody spoke. Then I handed Trevor a sealed envelope. What is this? Open it. His hands shook. Vanessa moved beside him. The color drained from both faces as they read, then read again, then a third time, because sometimes the human brain rejects disaster on first contact. Trevor looked up. What is this? I smiled. The beginning. And for the first time since that ambulance ride, I saw genuine fear, not fear of losing money. Fear of realizing they had attacked someone who'd already prepared 10 moves ahead. Trevor's hands were shaking so badly the envelope rattled. Vanessa grabbed the papers, read them herself, then immediately sat down, hard, like her knees had stopped working. I couldn't blame her. The document was simple. Only 3 pages, but those 3 pages had just destroyed every plan they'd been making. Trevor looked up. This can't be real. It is no. There has to be a mistake. There isn't. His voice became louder. What do you mean I was removed? I smiled. Exactly what the document says. 3 years earlier, long before the ambulance, long before the hospital, long before Vanessa's dinner reservation, I'd already noticed changes, small ones. Disrespect, entitlement, the assumption that everything I owned was eventually theirs. So I'd done something very few people ever think to do. I prepared early, very early. The Calloway Foundation didn't belong to my family. Never had, never would. Its charter specifically prohibited control from passing to descendants. Instead, every future director would be elected by an independent board, former judges, educators, doctors, community leaders, people chosen for character, not DNA. Trevor stared at me. You cut us out. No, I protected it from you. Big difference. Vanessa finally found her voice. You did this because of one misunderstanding. I laughed, the same dangerous laugh as before. One misunderstanding? I stepped closer. You told a paramedic to remove my oxygen mask. Silence. You searched my house while I was unconscious. More silence. You threw away family photographs. Still silence. You tried accessing financial records before asking whether I would survive. Nothing, absolutely nothing, because facts are difficult to argue with. Then I handed Trevor a second envelope. This one was much thicker. His face changed immediately. What now? Open it. Inside were contracts, purported deeds, partnership agreements, barred resolutions, hundreds of pages. The foundation owned the house. Not me, not Trevor, the foundation. Always had, for liability protection, a structure Elliot established decades earlier, the same structure Trevor never bothered learning about, because he assumed, and assumptions are expensive. Vanessa's mouth literally fell open. You don't own this house? No, the foundation does. Trevor looked sick, actually sick, because suddenly he understood. The movers, the removals, the scavenging, the property searches. They had effectively broken into foundation property, documented foundation property, photographed foundation property, witnessed by half the neighborhood. Mrs. Ramirez really was an extraordinary woman. Trevor collapsed into a chair. My God. Now he was finally seeing the situation clearly, not as an inheritance, not as a family disagreement, as a disaster. Then Elliot walked through the front door, perfect timing. The man always had excellent timing. He carried another folder, placed it on the dining room table, then looked at Trevor. Good afternoon. Trevor looked like he wanted to disappear. Elliot opened the folder. These are invoices. For what? Everything removed from the property. Trevor frowned. What do you mean? Professional restoration, archival recovery, document reconstruction, security replacement, inventory audits. The total sat at the bottom, $847,000. Vanessa nearly stopped breathing. 800. Her voice cracked. 800,000? Elliot nodded. The foundation intends to recover every dollar. Silence, pure silence, the kind that hurts. Then came the part neither of them expected. I sat down, across from them. Calm, relaxed, no anger left, because anger had already done its job. Now came consequences. You know what fascinates me? Neither answered. You both thought I was rich. You were excited. You thought there'd be houses, accounts, asset. You spent days searching for treasure. I leaned forward and never once searched for me. Neither could meet my eyes. The room stayed quiet for a very long time. Finally, Trevor whispered, "Dad." I raised my hand. "No, you don't get to call me Dad right now." That hit harder than any lawsuit. I watched it happen. The realization, the grief, the shame. Then I stood, walked toward the front door, opened it. Outside, 3 black SUVs pulled into the driveway. Trevor looked confused. Vanessa looked terrified. Good instincts. Several men and women stepped out. Not police, not lawyers. The foundation board. 12 people. Every one of them knew exactly what had happened. Every one of them had traveled there personally. The chairwoman entered first, former federal judge, 78 years old, sharp as broken glass. She looked around the damaged house, then at Trevor, then at Vanessa, then she spoke. Only one sentence. Imagine risking your entire future for a dinner reservation. Nobody said another word, because there wasn't anything left to say. 6 months later, the foundation opened its 23rd senior housing center, largest in its history, fully funded, debt-free, serving hundreds of abandoned elderly residents. I attended the opening ceremony, not as owner, not as founder, just another volunteer, exactly how I preferred it. People occasionally ask what happened to Trevor and Vanessa. Nothing dramatic, no prison, no miracle reconciliation, no emotional speech. Life simply became honest. Trevor lost the illusion that my life belonged to him. Vanessa lost the illusion that entitlement creates ownership, and both discovered something painful. The people you treat as obstacles sometimes turn out to be the bridge supporting everything beneath your feet. As for me, I still bake peach cobbler every Sunday, just not for them. Now I bring it to the senior center. Funny enough, the residents always say thank you, and none of them have ever suggested removing my oxygen mask to make a dinner reservation. Turns out, respect isn't complicated. You just have to choose it.